What steps is the school system taking now to make sure that schools are as safe as possible for students and teachers?
Well, as everybody knows, the coronavirus has kind of evolved as it's come to the United States, and then, as we've seen more and more places now, including Georgia, have cases where people have tested positively. We began taking steps, I'll say, more than a month ago, and those steps were cleaning areas a little more at risk, such as doorknobs and desktops and the things that we could go above and beyond every day that we do clean, but maybe not as much when you consider, the pencil sharpeners or things that are just high touch areas. And then, of course, sharing with our faculty and students about coughing into your arm or coughing into a tissue rather than just out in the open, and not coming to school if you're sick. Sometimes people want to just drive on through because sometimes it's easier to come to work than it is to stay at home. And so if they have fevers, we don't want them there. And so we've worked hard to inform. Always, the flu is an issue for us every year this time of year, so we monitor our attendance, and so educating our people is important. But then just in the last week, if you visit our website, you'll see that we've put out some more specific information about what parents can do to help us, what our employees and students can do to help, and then how we're responding to, say, students who've traveled to high-risk areas, whether in the country or out of the country. Same with faculty, and enrolling new families. When families come here, for example, from China, we don't immediately enroll them. We ask them to stay out for a period of time just to take that extra step to ensure that our families are safe as possible.
How are schools addressing if they see a student or a teacher possibly exhibiting some symptoms? How are they addressing that?
Well, of course, if it were a child or an adult, they would go to the office, and we would probably take their temperature to make sure that they don't have a fever. And then if they're sick, they just need to go home. And so, we're all probably hypersensitive right now about people who are sneezing and coughing and, maybe showing signs of respiratory distress. Again, it's a difficult time because it's flu season, and so many of the same symptoms of coronavirus are the symptoms you would experience if you had the flu. But everyone is concerned, children, parents, faculty, and so I would say that probably people are more aware that if you cough in public, somebody's going, oh no, they're coughing in public, and so it was just a tickle, or I swallowed wrong, or stuff like that. We want people to be well. And we are monitoring our attendance, and actually, compared to last year, our attendance over the last month has been higher than this time last year. Last year, we had students who experienced the flu. In fact, a nearby school district had canceled school for a couple of days to deep clean their building because of flu. This year, we haven't seen so much of that with our children. We're very thankful. And so we're, again, being hypervigilant. It's about all we can do. Athletic events that are Georgia High School associated, we're just talking to our schools about avoiding highly populated areas. For example, if we're traveling to a school for a competition, then we're saying don't eat at the mall where there are lots of people, or don't eat off the interstate where lots of people coming through would be. We're saying maybe consider eating at smaller restaurants that are in town where local people work and local people live. And then, you can't ensure that there's not someone somewhere. So we want them to wash their hands with soap at least 20 seconds. And if you see someone coughing or, then move away. Just being as diligent and as smart as you can about those things. We have We take direction from the Georgia Department of Health, from the CDC, of course from our governor, and so the canceling of school for an extended period of time or trips, we have to use good sense, and we also want our parents to be part of that decision when it's necessary.
What input and information are y'all getting from the Georgia Department of Education on how to handle the coronavirus?
Right now, basically how we are handling it is the best direction right now. I think that it's evolving, of course, as more cases become identified. That will probably influence the advice that we're being given. Right now, the advice is do all the things that you can do to avoid the flu, the virus. Stay away from those high-risk areas. And when you see someone who doesn't feel well, don't come to school, don't come to work. But as long as, when you have hundreds, sometimes thousands of people in a building, all you can do is everything that you can do. And, with spring break coming and masters in our area, a lot of people travel during that time and rent their homes to people who come from all over the country and all over the world. Those are things that our community is going to have to consider. And hopefully we'll see a decline in cases being identified. I understand that as weather gets warmer, maybe that's not not as good an environment for flu and flu-like things such as the coronavirus to spread. And so we can just pray that maybe it'll be on the decline and maybe it will not come here. And we're making preparations for it if it does.
What would be the deciding factor to close schools should the coronavirus come to the Augusta area?
Well, part of closing school is what's going on in those buildings. So if, for example, a case was identified from a family or a person inside of one of our buildings, I'm sure that we would close the building, if not for just a short period of time, to properly sanitize the entire building. If it were just to our area, probably we would take direction from the CDC or the health department or the governor who's been watching this. It would depend on just depend on who and where and how exposed the world would be to that.
How much advance notice would you be able to give parents should you decide to close the schools?
If we decided to close because a case was identified, say in the Augusta area, and we got outside guidance to do that closing, I would venture to say they would probably have at least a day or 2 days. If it happened because someone inside one of our schools was identified to have tested positive, that would probably happen more quickly. So maybe the next day. We have to, just depending on the case, would determine how much advance notice and the length of time that we were closed.
What consideration is being given to the daycare problem many parents would face should schools close?
That's always a problem for us. In our school district, we have over 28,000 students, and so we know that when we close a building or close the school district down, it comes, with a great stress on the community because parents most predominantly work, and so we always think of that. We also think about our children. Some children don't get lunch if they don't have school, free breakfast, free lunch, and so we don't take those decisions lightly. And I think our parents understand it. We don't want to put our children in danger, and so if there were a positive test that could cause our children to be exposed to danger, we would close immediately if that's what we had to do. I would say too that if we had a case, say, in a particular school, we don't need to shut down the entire school district. Maybe it would just be a school. So again, those decisions would have to be made on a case-by-case basis. But we understand that when there is no school, the whole community suffers.
And you mentioned about the free and reduced lunch. How, if the schools did close, how would the school system assist those students who otherwise may not be getting a meal?
Again, I guess that would depend on why we closed, how many schools were closed, what was going on in the community. Because if, for example, we found ourselves to be in the position of, say, Italy, where the entire community is being asked to stay home, to stay put, we probably wouldn't be able to do anything. And then depending on how the school closed, maybe it would be that our employees, they're of equal importance to us. We want to ensure the safety and well-being of everyone. So it might be that the delivery of food could be interrupted, the receiving of food being delivered to us. You can imagine 31 cafeterias, there's a lot more that goes into having lunch and breakfast than just having someone in the kitchen preparing it. So it's really difficult to say. But I can say that when we make those decisions, the well-being of our children is our top priority, our children and our staff.
How would students make up the lost instructional time if schools closed?
Earlier in our conversation, I said we're making plans. We right now are making plans for a learn from home environment. Our board approved about two board meetings ago, they approved for our high school students to have a learn from home day on our early release day this Friday. And so we have asked all of our teachers across the district to prepare for a learn from home environment. And we are providing for them a template for how to do that, some parameters of what that would look like. For example, the length of time that you could expect a student to spend in each of their subject areas. We have already talked with our teachers of the year by every grade level to know that the majority of our students would have ability to use technology if that were part of it, but also just to be able to have a learn from home day with teachers having a certain period of time where they would, I'll call it, would be in office so that children or parents could contact them. We understand that if we had a learn from home day for high school students, they're independent learners, they can really do it on their own. If we were to have a learn from home day for elementary age children, that would be assuming that their parents or some adult was with them and could help them. So we're making plans for our teachers to be able to provide 3 to 5 days of learn from home instruction. If our schools were closed for longer than 3 to 5 days, that would probably be a decision that was made by our governor or by the CDC, and if that were the case, and say the period of time encompassed 2 weeks to a month, I would probably imagine that they would delay the end of the school year, or they would call it off altogether, because once elementary children have missed a certain number of days, it's very difficult to maintain a learning environment without a teacher having some access to those children.
Would the instruction time for the school year change or be shortened if the schools were to close?
It could, just like a snow day, an ice day, the hurricane day, a day of a flood. There's built into state law that schools can cancel. I think it's 4 to 5 days, or there's a time frame. If the school year were to be drastically shortened, that would probably come as a direction from the governor. And if that were the case, there are other aspects that have to be considered. For example, just the way our children are assessed from year to year, the way our schools are measured, the way teachers are measured with Georgia milestones, the standardized test. And probably if schools were closed for a period of time that was extended more than just like a snow or ice day or several days, probably I would venture to say that the powers that be would make a decision to shorten the school year. If we missed 10 to 20 days of school, it would not be out of the realm of thinking that they might cancel the standardized tests for that school year, because the results would certainly be impacted negatively by just the number of days that students missed. As far as graduation goes, high school students, we could modify what was required of their learning to focus on just the high stakes learning that they would need. It would not affect graduation. Students could still graduate. The standardized tests, they're standardized, which means certain periods of time, and those would be affected if we missed too many days of school. So I would think that maybe they would be canceled altogether for a year.
What percentage of employees are hourly and don't have paid leave, and how would canceling school affect them?
That's a really good question. We were talking about that earlier. A learn from home day, as we've just discussed, teachers are still working, children are still doing their part, and so we don't have school, but bus drivers, potentially nutrition workers, secretaries, custodians, those people may or may not be working depending on if they were cleaning the building and such. When you say percentage, I can tell you that we have about 3,300 employees. About 1,800 or so of them are certified staff, maybe 19, well more 13 or 1,400 non-certified staff. And so those people wouldn't be working in those on those days, so it would affect them. They're hourly waged employees, and when they're not working, they're not being paid.